You know the saying, you just gotta try your best. I would say that you gotta be the best. Is being top 20% of your class good enough for you? No. If you want something, you gotta get after it, and then you will start producing good results, and then you will build confidence along the way. Let's just cut to the chase. Here are 10 study techniques that I swear by as a medical student. They help me get into medicine, and I use these on a day-to-day basis. Half of them focus on the actual study techniques, and the other half focus on the study mentality, which is just as important. Let's start with the first one. First, you gotta study from the testable core materials outwards. So let's say the box represents all the information that is presented to you, and the star in the middle is the testable material. Someone who doesn't know how to study will go from top to bottom, covering every single little detail, and when the exam time comes, they haven't covered like 20 to 30% of what is testable. Whereas someone who knows how to study will start from the middle, study from the core materials that is testable, and then study outwards, and when the exam time comes, although they haven't studied everything, they studied what is important and what is testable. I know that you want to be the best student as possible. I want to be the best doctor as possible. So when studying, we have this tendency to try to learn everything. But we have to make this mindset shift from focusing on those long-term goals to short-term goals. And those short-term goals when you're taking courses is to pass and get good grades in every midterm and every exams that is presented before you. And then those long-term goals will take care of themselves. So how do you know what's testable or not? There are 3 ways of figuring that out. First is to look for practice tests or previous tests. Sometimes the lecturers give you, a couple questions at the end of their lecture to go over on. Pay attention to those. I also looked online in undergrad to figure out if there were any practice tests lying around. I asked seniors if they've taken the course and if they had any practice material. I asked my friend who's also taking the course. You gotta use your resources to figure out if there are any additional study materials that you can use. You have to think like an examiner, not a learner. So when you're going over the material, always imagine in your mind, how can I test this in a multiple choice format? How can I test this in a short answer format? And then try to learn that way. Number 2 on the list is to write good, concise notes and then plan out your timing for all your midterms and all your exams, and then constantly evaluate as you're studying so that you're not falling behind. So for example, let's say you're taking 5 courses, and before a midterm you have to go over 10 lectures per course, and then each lecture has 50 slides. That totals up to 2,500 slides that you have to go over before a midterm. So you have to write a good, concise note that summarizes everything, that makes it manageable for you to go over the materials before you write the midterms so that you're not overloaded. Try to write notes as concise as possible, containing keywords and important information. You know that if you don't remember something from your note, you have the PowerPoint slides that you can always fall back on. Number 3 on the list is to use active recall when learning. I made a video on this previously that you can watch, but let me expand on that further here. Let me start off by giving you examples of students who don't know how to study. So when presented with an information like mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell, what they do is, without thinking, they just write. Nothing's coming into their brains. So what I do when I'm going over my notes is I read the information, I write only the keywords, and then as opposed to looking at my notes, I look at that keyword. For example, what is mitochondria? And then I try to think, mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell. Why is it the powerhouse of the cell? And then I try to supplement information from the lecture. It is the power of the cell because it produces ATP. So I'm using all of my senses. I'm writing down, which is my tactile emotion. I'm saying things out, which is verbal. I'm looking at my notes previously. I'm using my visual cues. And as I'm saying it, I'm listening, so I'm using also my auditory senses. And most often, when you're actively recalling, you cannot remember all the information. And that is okay, because studies have shown that just by attempting to recall, you're creating that connection between the information and your memory. And number 4, I cannot emphasize this enough, reviewing is just as important as learning new information. So if I have 20 lectures to go over before a midterm, for example, as opposed to going 1 to 20 and then going back to 1 to 20, what I do is I go to 1 to 5, and then I review 1 to 5 quickly, and then move on to 6 to 10. And then once I'm done 6 to 10, even more quickly I go over 1 to 5, and then I look over 6 to 10, and then I go on to 11 to 15. Obviously, you have to time this correctly before a midterm so that you actually cover everything. Number 5 is more of a mentality thing. You have to study harder for your midterms than your final exams. You're gonna obviously study hard for your final exam, but you have to study harder for your midterms because that sets the tone for the entire course. Let's say you got a bad mark on a midterm, then the entire course is just a catch-up game. You're worrying the whole time, probably 2 to 3 months, worrying about whether you're gonna get a good enough final mark so that you can make up for getting a bad mark on your midterms. Number 6 is having a strong mindset throughout school year. I'm gonna come across as a little harsh here, but you know the saying, you just gotta try your best. I would say that you gotta be the best. Is your best really the top 1% of your class? Is your best the top 5% of your class? If the program that you want to get into in the end has less than 10% acceptance rate, is being top 20% of your class good enough for you? No. So if you want something, you got to get after it, and then you will start producing good results, and then you will build confidence along the way. Number 7 is putting the work in and outworking everyone, which is kind of counterintuitive to put it in this video because this is a study technique video. But compared to someone who knows all these study techniques but doesn't work hard, someone who doesn't know any of these techniques and is just putting the hours in studying and getting the information into their brain is always going to beat that person with better study techniques. I wasn't the brightest person in my class, so what I did was I just literally outworked everyone. How do I know that? I walked into a library before everyone else and I walked out of the library after everyone else. I spent my time studying on Friday nights, Saturday nights when everyone was going out partying, and there was one other student that was leaving the library at the same time late night, and he's now a cardiac surgery resident at U of A. So things like that happen. So you just have to outwork everyone if you really want to be successful. Number 8 is getting a serious study partner and friend who want it as bad as you. If you think it's gonna be hard to find them, well, if you start studying late nights at a library all the time, you tend to come across these guys. It's hard coming in early in the morning and leaving late at night, coming in on weekends. But in undergrad, I had a group of friends who I really studied with, and we didn't really disturb each other. When it was time to study, we studied. We didn't interrupt each other. And when the business was taken care of, we went out and had fun. Number 9 is staying consistent and staying on top of everything, especially in medicine where there's like a million things going on. If I start to lose track of things, I get super stressed. So I have to be on top of every email. I have to be on top of every, assessments and all the work that I have to do. In undergrad, you're dealing with 5 courses plus your extracurriculars and everything going on. So you have to stay on top of things so that you don't fall behind and get stressed. Let me give you an example of consistency and why it is so important. You have student A and student B. Student A is working Friday night, Saturday, Sunday, 12 hours each. Student B decides to work on Friday but takes Saturday and Sunday off. Then that student B has fallen behind student A by 24 hours. So no matter how hard he tries, on Monday studying 14 hours as opposed to 12 hours, on Tuesday studying 16 hours, that guy is always playing catch up to student A. And when you're on a curve in university and undergrad, you're just gonna not be able to compete against student A. Number 10 is effectively controlling your anxiety and your worry when you're going through school. There are 2 types of warriors. One is someone who doesn't study and is worried about not studying. The solution to that is simple. You just gotta study. Number 2, the second type of warrior is someone who worries despite having done all their studies. And when you're in that position, then you need to write down what you're worried about. So on a notebook, on an iPad or whatever, you're worrying because you're not seeing what you're worried about. So divide a line halfway in the middle, write down what you can control and what you cannot control. And something like what you can control is waking up early, going to the library and studying for X amount of hours and staying focused when you're studying. What you cannot control is the actual grades that I'm gonna get from this course. So if I'm worried, am I gonna get a B? Am I gonna get a B plus? Am I gonna get an A minus, A plus? You cannot control that. Just focus on what you can control, and you just have to give up on what you cannot control.